myself, Rachel, in your company. Definitely good to be back with you one more time, and this time around in the afternoon. But it's always a pleasure just to meet amazing people. And good afternoon, Andre and Tina B.
Rachel, you look amazing there. You're like an octopus. You've got about 6 arms pushing all the buttons. You make it
Listen, we
look so
try.
easy.
We try. But yeah, it's good to have you guys in
Thanks
studio.
so much. Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, good, you too. And we're chatting all things self-image, and let's just be honest, that is definitely a conversation in the day and age that we live in. It's so easy to look at a mirror and not see what God has made us to see, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think one of the examples that I wanted to use, in fact, I wanted to use 2 examples, is I became a professional speaker in my late 40s. And I've had an amazing life. God has blessed me enormously. I've had fantastic jobs. I've had oodles of money. I've done things. I've traveled the world. And I have no photographic evidence of it because I was always the guy standing behind the camera. And so I've got thousands of photographs of my wife in every single country around the world. There are none of me. And as I became a professional speaker, I was trying to encourage people to say, there's so much out there that you can do. Let me show you when I went. I can't show you when I went skydiving because I didn't take a photograph. Or when I went, no, I didn't take a photograph.
Oh, man.
And a lot of that was due to my own poor self-image.
Right.
And I think for most of us, as we get a little bit older, we think, when we were 20, we were so gorgeous. When we were 30, we were magnificent. And when we were 40, we were in our prime. And at 50, now we're old. So when we're 60, we're old. And that sometimes is a self-image that we do. And it's not just physical.
Right.
Because one of the things that recently happened that you won't know, but Tina just won the Western Cape's Most Positive Role Model Award.
Nice.
And she was, when she was there, she actually cried once.
Right.
And she said, look at all these other people, how amazing they are. They've got so many degrees. Maybe you can share it, Tina.
Yeah, I mean, I just felt very overwhelmed. I never sort of managed to finish studying my formal education. So, I was sick. And so, I mean, I was in a room with girls with 4 doctorates,
Wow.
let alone degrees. And I just thought to myself, well, what am I doing here? I can't compare to these ladies. They're incredible. I mean, there were women that were CFOs of big listed financial companies, and chief operating officers. And you just think to yourself, how in the world did little old me even get into a room or a category with women of this caliber? And it blew my mind. And I felt so unworthy to be there.
Sure.
I think that's one of those things. It's a difficult thing. It's such an amazing statement. But I felt unworthy to have a photograph of myself, and Tina felt unworthy in this competition.
Yeah.
And yet, when I tell people who Tina is, everyone gasps and goes, oh my word, look at it. I don't know if you know, but Tina is Africa's longest lasting survivor of a heart and double lung transplant.
What?
So she has this incredible testimony of things that has happened. And every time you say something, everyone goes, wow. And you say, and this lady's the chairman of Sanlam.
Right.
And then people go, oh no, she's boring. Let's go back to Tina again. Sorry to the lady from Sanlam. But it's one of those things. And I think it's a little bit how God sees us. I can see that every time I always introduce them, I said, I hope I'm not giving you a sort of like, this is your identity.
Right.
But if I can tell people how amazing you are, and I can see the reaction in their eyes, or just the reaction you just gave us, the same reaction. If I can see that kind of reaction, I think that's the kind of reaction God has with us. He sees things that we don't have.
Yeah.
But the thing that I just wanted to chat about a few things quickly today.
Okay.
And just say, social media is a terrible thing.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's a wonderful thing, but it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing when you see other people having these incredible lives, always looking amazing, always having the best shot, and they've got their best bikini at their magnificent pool in Clifton, and there's nothing that makes you feel less worthy than do continuous comparison. So, Rachel, you're the clever one here. What should we do?
Oh, well.
You don't know I
You're
do this.
asking me a
I
question.
normally do this.
But you know what you're saying though, Andre, it's so on point. Because a lot of times we see a photo and we like, oh wow, this person has it all figured out, that's all together. But we forget about the fact that behind the scenes, while before that photo was taken, maybe the kids were screaming in the background, maybe they were shouting, or maybe they were trying to get the best lighting and the best filter before they post that photo. But yet I go across and I look at it and I'm like, wow, she's absolutely beautiful. Why don't I look that way?
Mm.
And how am I seeing myself? Not the way that not the way that
So
God
you're
sees
actually
me, right?
seeing a very curated version of my life.
Mm.
So and it's quite common today, because what happens is we become our own best brands.
Right.
So if you have a photograph and you can see how big my stomach is, you go, oh, I don't want him. And then what happens? You do this very curated photograph where it's from a certain angle and the light is good. And what happens? You go, wow, he's an amazing looking guy.
Right.
And one of the things we've got to be careful is that what we're looking at is not always reality. It's not always reality. And another question I wanted to go through today is just say, when are we being a bit boastful? You know, where every single time you open up, it's a new picture of me. I always look magnificent. I'm only at the best places with the best people. And that's me. I do that because I'm continuously speaking at incredible conferences, and I'm sitting there with other famous people. And one of the things that I do is I take a photograph of myself because it increases my viewing percentages.
Right.
And then people go, oh, wow, he knows Sia Kolisi. He's friends with Trikus, you know.
Right.
He's nearly as tall as Eben. You know, sort of they do all these things.
Yeah.
And it's very good for marketing. But one of the problems is that we've got to be careful. So on the one hand, I want you to not feel too bad, because sometimes you're comparing yourself against something that's very, very sort of looked at and doctored and filtered. But on the other hand, I think there's also a danger that we become too big-headed, that we lose our humility, that we start saying we things that we're not. And so maybe, Tina, you can maybe address it. How do we fix that problem, especially on things like social media?
I think the important thing in our lives is to have balance, you know, and I think God has a wonderful way of bringing us down a peg or two if need be, and humbling us.
Oh yes, oh yes.
But yeah, I think the important thing is to celebrate our wins, but when we are having a hard time, to ask for help, because it just balance. Really, you know, there's good and bad in everything. And if you're starting to look at yourself and think to yourself, oh well, I wish I had a life like that, or I wish I looked like that person, or whatever. No, that's not the way God made you. Why don't you look at yourself through God's eyes? Yes, you have flaws, and we need to acknowledge those and work on those and make them better. But focus on your positives, because God loves you and He's made you that way for a specific reason.
I think that's so important, though, what you said, Tina, is the fact that look at the way God sees you, the way that you were created, because the Bible says we were created in His image. So, I mean, if you're going to look at yourself and say, oh, is that the way I look? But we were created in God's image. So is that what we see of God? And I know it's very difficult, because a lot of times as our human beings, we do see ourselves. And like you were saying, you know, Andre, that a lot of times we see each other and we're like, I don't like this about me. I don't like that about me. And we can be our biggest critics as well, you know, finding all the faults about each other. But how does God see us? I think that is so key on that.
Absolutely.
I would tell you a very personal story. I hope my wife is listening. I've been married to her now for 31 years. And when I met her, guys, trust me on this, she was a hot babe. She was beautiful and gorgeous and sexy, and I loved her to death, and so did everybody else. But time marches on. And it marches on, and one day you look there and suddenly you're a few kilos heavier, you're 3 inches shorter, there's a few more lines on your face. But one of the things, and I'll never forget going to one of my elders in my church, and we were actually teasing him. His name was Roy, and we said to him, Roy, when you're 75 years old, it's a group of men, and we said, and you see a nice 74-year-old, you know, do you ever think to yourself, she's pretty? And he went, yes, often. And I was, what do you mean by that? And he said, I often see them like they were when I first met them.
Wow.
And I think one of the things that God does for us, I look at my wife now and I still ask her that question, are you a model? Every single day. because to me she looks as pretty as the day that I met her. And I think it's a wonderful gift that God gives men or husbands or wives, is to see your husband as he once was physically, but then also to have the sense to say this is how much he is in maturity levels or in terms of intellect or whatever those other things are. But the thing that I really want to get across today is self-image is one of those things. We are always going to feel lesser than.
Right.
And what I want you to do is just for a second, look at your child and say, that's the most beautiful child. Go look at your wife and say, that's the most beautiful wife. And I want you guys to start looking at yourselves and say, I want to be the best version of who I am, but not to knock yourself the whole time. A low self-image can block you enormously from leading the life that you should have led.
Wow. So on point with that.
Has anybody phoned in? Is anybody else feeling as ugly as me today?
Andre, start looking at yourself through
Yeah,
God's
I was
eyes.
going to say the exact same thing. Thank you,
I'm
Tina.
gorgeous today.
You just said it, you know.
I keep telling Roby he's got to introduce me as the gorgeous Andre.
Well, that's it. There you heard it, guys. The big, positive, gorgeous Andre and Tina V on the drive this afternoon. Thank you so much for your time.
Rachel, thank you so
Definitely
much.
something that we all could take away from this and learn. Thank you for that.